Hello everyone, I know this is a different game. I almost exclusively talk about TF2. However, I know there's a lot of TF2 players that are Bloons fans, and there was a recent DLC release, Bloons Rogue Legends. Oh, I didn't mean to click that. Whatever. And I figured I would kind of talk about it because I am a fan of roguelikes. I'd say my most played is definitely Slay the Spire. I have Ascension 20 on every character in that game. I was a big Isaac fan as well. I didn't really get into Balatro like many other people did, but nonetheless, I like roguelikes. So when a game I already enjoy, Bloons TD6, comes out with a roguelike format, I definitely wanted to check it out. Now, this is more of a criticism video because I want to sort of talk about where I think the format fails. And I'm only saying this because I think that there's a lot of things that that this does well, and a lot of ways in which it's pretty easy to improve things. I know there's other videos out there like ISAB. I haven't watched actually his criticism or his thoughts on the format rather, but yeah, a lot of that is related to like balance and whatnot. I'm going to be talking about balance adjacent things, but more so just kind of look at how this, roguelike DLC sort of fits into the genre and ways in which it could maybe fit better as well. So yeah, I'll be using examples from other games, stuff like that, and so be it. The run I'm using right now is actually pretty insanely broken. Which actually does sort of key into some of the things we're going to talk about. I started with Essence of Phase because I extracted it earlier, and then just base Oben means that you have really strong druids. Once you get a 1-3-0 druid, a lot of the early Red Bloons rounds, you basically just guarantee win. And especially since on this run I got the other really broken relic for this setup, which is Growing Steady. I got this quite early as well. This run is insanely good, and having good runs is a big part of roguelikes. A lot of the time the replayability of the genre is in getting those really strong runs, and especially with games like Slay the Spire, for example, you get really broken decks in ways that you really haven't gotten before, and it's really satisfying. So having a really strong run is still fun, don't get me wrong, although in this case there's definitely, it's just like 2 relics basically kind of wins me the game. Right, so relics are the first thing I want to talk about, and that is the fact that a lot of them are just not good. It seems like they're trying to shy away from just basic statistical, and we're just going to place our base druid here, and that probably just wins us this red bloon encounter. It seems like they're trying to shy away from just straight up statistical improvements, and make things a little more unique. For example, the wacky wiggly pattern on the heli pilot, rather than just increasing their firing speed and adding a heli pilot. So the balance of these relics do take into account the fact that you're adding that tower into your party. And that's honestly the main reason you take a lot of these, is because, like, for example, I, in the previous stage, needed to fight against Dread Bloon. I basically just have magic monkeys. I have Spike, but I figured a heli pilot could help, and it sure did. So that's the only reason I took it. And a lot of the time, the kind of flavor doesn't really help. Having extra Buccaneer charges, sure, whatever. But a lot of the time, you're just looking for the stats, right? But those aren't honestly some of the worst defenders. I think some of the worst defenders are the ones that just make the towers worse. And you can already see the pacing of the game and Red Bloon encounters is something that I'm going to talk about. So I think there's a few things that should be improved on that front. For starters, just balancing them in better ways. For example, the MIB relic just kind of makes towers worse, because yes, it gives them the ability to hit everything, but they attack so much slower that a lot of the time that's just not worth. In fact, most of the time, I would say. And also, I mean, there's just gonna be things that don't synergize well. I just beat Dreadbloon and took the Dreadbloon artifact. So if I got the, for example, artifact that that increases military monkeys' attack speed, but decreases it for every tower you place, well, depending on how many towers I plan on placing with my strategy, that might be a bad relic to take, even though it's otherwise good, which I think is fine. I mean, in all sorts of other games, you're going to be tasked with those choices of things that might be situationally good, but you kind of have to address how good it is for your particular run, and then, you know, go from there. And yeah, like a more skilled player is going to make those decisions better and whatnot. I think that's fine. However, for some of the like particularly bad ones, I think you really should just, well, not only either make them at least somewhat takeable. So examples of bad items I can think of that situationally can be quite good are, let's say, an Isaac, not Sacred Heart, Isaac's Heart. A lot of the time it's going to be like really inconsistent as to being able to dodge, but in certain situations it can be really broken. Similarly, chocolate milk is soy milk, excuse me. It's been a while since I played Isaac. Soy milk, another example that a lot of the time it's just not worth taking, but if you have, for example, Libra, which balances your stats, then it turns into a really big statistical improvement overall. So it's fine to have items that are kind of bad, but situationally still good. However, with that kind of balancing, and just in general, I think the ability to skip relics is important, because I think of other roguelikes, and you are not forced to take something, right? For example, when you finish an encounter in Slay the Spire, you are not forced to take a card. You can look at them and choose to skip. Yeah. So, yeah, relics, big things, I think, are, some of them are just really bad. A lot of them are kind of uninteresting as well. It seems like they're trying to go the route of, you know, having them actually change how the tower functions to some degree, but a lot of the time it doesn't really improve much, at least in the case of, like, military, for example. Like, I don't care how my heli pilot shoots in a zigzag or not, and things of that nature. It doesn't really matter, and you're more taking it for the stats and the fact that you get to pick up the tower. What else about relics? I expect as they add more, and I do think they're gonna be adding more and improving this game, more relics will definitely make things nice, because sometimes runs can feel a little samey, because as long as it's 5 stages and there's so many chests and shops that you're going to visit, you kind of see everything. So if you're, you know, in a situation like I am, where you kind of just need, you know, the starting relic that you're guaranteed to take, and one other relic to just become insanely broken, well, all you're really doing that whole game is searching for that one relic, and then you're good. Obviously, things are a little more complex than that, but, you know, at a basic level. Right. So that is the relics. That's the kind of first point. Second thing are the shops. I know that red balloon encounters and the sheer number of them, I think, have been decreased, as well as the number of rounds you have to spend on them, which I do think are all improvements. Shops, you still end up with so much currency, and like I have 18 right now, and I have been, to be honest, pretty much avoiding red balloon encounters, or at least taking the shortest path so far, which is more than enough to buy basically anything I need. But on top of that, if there are relics that don't really help my run but don't explicitly hurt it, a fantastic example here being, let's say, Pops Fired. This is a legendary relic. I don't have anything that sets balloons on fire. I suppose I could go top path Spike, and I guess middle path Bucket. Point being, like, I don't really benefit from this very well, but since I got it effectively for free, because it's just a chest on the way, well, that's effectively currency as well, because you barter your own relics and the token. So you end up with just such a surplus of money that shops basically boil down to, does it have something useful at all for me? And if it does, then I take it. And that's it. There's really no decision making to be made at shops, and there's no real reason to go out of your... Well, the reason you might want to go out of your way to a shop is just because you're searching for like that one relic. So if I didn't have like growing thorns, or growing steady, I think it's called. If I didn't have that, then I might be routing more towards shops, for example. And that's kind of boring. And I think there's a few ways that shops can be improved in this format. So for starters, I honestly don't necessarily... Well, I do think you just get too much money. Part of that is just there's still a lot of red balloon encounters, to be honest, even after they decrease them. So you still end up with a lot of money. So that is certainly a part of the problem. But it's also... There aren't as many things that you just spend money on relics, right? When I think of shops in, for example, Isaac, you have, you know, your regular passive items, you have active items, you have consumables as well, like different ways to make your run stronger. And I think that shops could maybe benefit from that. If there was a, you know, let's say particularly expensive option to mentor a tower, or maybe even a part of the shop that you can buy base towers to add to your party, rather than only getting those through relics. I think there's multiple ways that you can make shops more valuable while also being like money sinks that people can spend tokens on, so shops don't strictly boil down to, okay, is this relic useful? Then I'll pick it up and still have tokens left over. You know, there might be more decisions there. On top of that, I think the shop could benefit from a shop-specific relic rotation, or at least have shop-specific relics, maybe even strong ones that, you know, would encourage players to maybe go out of their way to go to the shop. Because as it stands now, if your run is strong enough, then you're just taking the shortest path. Because the idea of like going out of your way to make things stronger seems like just a kind of waste of time, to be honest, compared to other games where you might still, like in Isaac, for example, if I have a really strong run, sure, sometimes I'll just run it to the end and then like get it over with. But a lot of the time, like I'm trying to eke out as much as possible to see kind of how far I can push the envelope, and things like that. And the game doesn't punish you for that. It doesn't feel like a massive waste of time because you're clearing out stuff so quickly. But we'll get to that at the end because that's kind of my biggest point. Yeah, I think shop-specific items. There's a shop rotation in Isaac. There's a shop rotation in Slay the Spire. There are certain like artifacts, I think they're called in Spire, that you only really see in shops. So if you are looking for a specific item, then you know routing to a shop is a good idea in that case. Right. So that, I think, are the kind of two main ways that shops could be improved. You know, you either introduce more ways for players to... Well, I think all together. You introduce more ways for players to spend money and you know, make decisions that are interesting, rather than, again, the current, you know, setup where you just either get what's useful or there's nothing useful and you leave. Because money is not really a concern. That's the second part, money. You just get so much of it that you don't really have to make difficult decisions about giving up like relics to get shop ones, which I think is a decision that you should be tasking players with. It makes things interesting. Now, I will say, I suppose this is as good a time to make this point as any, that it depends on like how... I suppose I understand that, you know, Bloons does have a large casual audience. You might want to... you know, not make the roguelike too difficult necessarily. I guess there is a chimps mode, but I mean, in all these encounters and whatnot, I'm as far as I'm aware, just abiding by chimps rules. I'm not farming or anything like that. So it doesn't really change things that much. But I still think that, you know, tasking players with that choice is something that is still interesting. And even like a casual player is still able to understand, like, okay, should I give up, for example, my spike factory to get this strong item from the shop that I think more like better suits my my run or something like that. But anyway, that's shops. I think shops could be improved a lot. And the very last thing is just pacing. I think Bloons in general struggles with pacing a bit and has kind of earned itself a reputation as sort of the background game, or just like a very casual game, which I think it excels at, don't get me wrong. But the reason for that is, at least in like the base Bloons game, and when I say base Bloons game, I'm not talking about anything without a leaderboard, right? If you're just going for a map completion, let's say you're doing just easy difficulty because you need to grind out a black border. You've already done the black border chimps, but now you just need to do pointless maps to actually get the border. If I start with Soda and then get a anything that can hit leads, like for example just a middle path bomb, then you just win on like round 14 or 15, but you still have to play out the full 40, so it's just a lot of AFKing. And even on like chimps runs and more difficult difficulties of these same maps, okay, is there anything I mean, it really doesn't matter that much. I guess I'll take a beast handler. You can see with the amount of currency I can buy anything I want, even if there's multiple things that are useful. But nonetheless, even in more difficult difficulties, the game kind of still boils down to you need to get certain upgrades by the time you need them to not lose, and that's it. How are we going to set this up? Let's see. This I'm actually doing some decision making for. I think this will probably be good. Right. So, and this is the first time I've actually had to make like decisions, because again, earlier it's just kind of easy. Anyway, what was I saying? So, let me pause quickly to collect my thoughts and take a sip of water. We were talking about pacing. Notes here. Man, I really did lose my train of thought. Right. What was it? Because the pacing is a problem. Maybe I should start talking, and then maybe it'll come back to me. So yeah, the pacing is definitely an issue. In other roguelikes, when your run is really strong, the game is faster. Oh right, I was talking about base Bloons and how there's just a lot of AFKing. In chimps, as long as you get the upgrade you need by the time you need it, then you just are effectively AFKing until you need your next upgrade, right? That's just kind of how the base game works. And I think it's fine overall. But it's definitely interesting to actually be like actively playing, and microing and stuff like that can be interesting, which is why there's so many different game modes and things like that that definitely encourage that. For example, I think like the particular highlight of Rogue Legends is the mini games and the bosses, because you actually like kind of think this is the first map I did this entire stage in this video. This is the first map I've actually thought about, right, and made a decision, and it kind of ruined my train of thought to do that. But it's still going to be a pretty effortless win, it looks like. But still, these are what are actually interesting, and the red balloon encounters just aren't. All they really serve to do is waste your time. I understand the concept of like the difficulty scaling, punishing you for going on further paths. I think a more neat way this could be accomplished is make them just so much rarer and actually difficult. Because the way it is now, they just really aren't that hard. Early game, honestly, like depending on your setup, they can be pretty tough. If I didn't have the phase relic giving me camo detection, I would have a real trouble with camos. And that is actually another more balancey issue I have, is that the heroes themselves, this is going to be a tangent, the heroes themselves don't really scale that well, I think, because a lot of the heroes that you need or you want certain upgrades on to synergize with other towers, there's many examples, but for example, Oben giving camo detection, Rosalia actually giving the discount to the aircraft towers that you start out with, as well as many others. I mean, even just like the what's it called, the heroes themselves. For example, Churchill, like you don't even like start out with the minigun when you have enough money to start out with the hero. Like Azili, I'm sure you're basically taking that hero for, you know, the Moab hacks and things like that. A lot of these really important upgrades for the hero and how they function and how they synergize with other towers just aren't available for most of these early red balloon encounters because you just don't level up fast enough, which I don't think is good. I think that the scaling should be a little better there, so that, for example, you know, maybe because you think, for example, in a chimps game with Oben, you get him relatively early because he's decent early game, and you can just use his brambles for pretty much all the early camo detection up until he gives druids camo detection. That's not really the case here, and yeah, you just don't have that option. So the hero scaling, I think, could be improved to make them actually synergize well with the towers and whatnot. This seems really good. I'm going to take that. Okay. We can just extract whatever. I'll extract this. Oh, I already have Dreadbloon. I didn't realize. So this kind of anti-synergizes if I place a lot of towers. But it's a legendary, and I think I can win without it, so I will extract it. Okay. Right. Now the real meat red balloon encounters. They're just really boring. And I think that, again, when you're really strong in other roguelikes, you win faster. When you are, we do here, I guess we can mentor or something. Right, let's get a base Pop Lust. When you're really strong in Isaac, you can clear the room with like one shot. When you're really strong in Slay the Spire, you can clear the wave in, you know, a few turns, sometimes even one turn. When you're really strong in Balatro, you can clear the stage in one turn. In Rogue Legends, when you're really strong, you clear the wave, or you clear the balloon encounter in the exact same amount of time, but it's just more AFK, which is really bad. That is my primary complaint, is the fact that the stronger the run, the worse the pacing feels, because you are just not paying attention because you don't have to, because you've already won. Like, I have already won at the very start here. And thankfully, I only have to, you know, deal with a handful of rounds. They did decrease that recently. But still, it's just AFKing. And the real problem as well is that it's not actually true AFKing, because you still have to be around, because, and we might see it here, you just get a pop-up to that complete, there we go. And it does not matter at all what I take here, because I've already won. Yes, this actually helps my run. I could get a Jungle Drums Village. Like, these are choices that make sense and are interesting if my run isn't good. But considering the fact that the red balloon encounters are pretty easy once you actually get going, and once you actually get, you know, good upgraded towers that do well in these encounters, once you're at that point, those decisions really don't matter much anymore, and all they serve to do is just interrupt your AFK to get to the end of it. So especially if it's a red balloon encounter that goes a long time, it's just really, really tedious having to be just not AFK enough to get through those screens so that you can actually get to the interesting parts of the game, such as the mini games and the bosses and stuff like that. So I think there's a few different ways that this can be improved on. First is, I've kind of already talked about, you can make these red balloon encounters quite rare, but actually challenging, to the point where suddenly, because as it is now, whether or not I go down a long path or not, really depends. And I could have spawned over here, but can you just imagine like how many red balloon encounters I'd have to deal with? Sure, there's a legendary chest. There's so many chests here. There's a mini game. This is a, and yeah, different, you know, boss things. There are so many, you know, things here that I could do, but it would take me an extra, you know, 45 minutes just AFKing basically with the red balloon encounters. So even though there's a lot of like interesting and fun things, and and enticing things that would make me want to go down this path. It's just the sheer time I'd have to put in AFKing that would prevent me from choosing that path, which I don't think should be the case. I think it should be more so, well, these encounters are difficult. Maybe there's like a couple or a few encounters here and far less here, but they're actually difficult. And suddenly it's like, okay, these encounters are scaling pretty hard. Can I actually get through this path cleanly? You know, it's a similar choice they're making in Slay the Spire when you choose where you're going through the map. You can go through like a multiple elite path and be like, okay, well, I'm expecting to take some damage here. Will I just straight up die and lose my run because I, you know, got too aggressive and kind of egoed out and went down this path? Then you analyze the path and say, okay, this elite is here. Are there, you know, campfires after the elite that I can heal at if I need to in an emergency, things like that. So you actually analyze the map in that way. And I think that you can very easily analyze this map in that way if it's, you know, balanced for that, rather than the red balloon encounters. Yes, they do scale kind of late, but they're still easy, like really easy, and kind of just serve as a waste of time as well, right? So if this were very sparsely populated with those encounters, then I can think, okay, I don't know if my run is like good enough to deal with, you know, 4 of those really scaled red blue encounters. But if I get this legendary chest, maybe I do well in the mini game because I have a good setup for like races or something like that. Then I can get, you know, strong enough to deal with those, for example. So just the fact that there's so many and that they are really easy and they get regularly interrupted means that the pacing is just so off, where the stronger the run is, sometimes the more boring it is because these regular encounters are just so easy. I suppose I should drop a pop list here. Right, and other ways this can be fixed. So there are quite a few. You don't even have to, if you want to keep the number of red balloon encounters that you have and keep how difficult they are the same. Let's say you want to be friendlier to casual players who might, you know, not be good enough to get past like particularly hard ones. I think that's fine, but you really need to fix something like this where I've already won basically, but I just keep getting interrupted. So there's a few ways to do that. For starters, I can think of another roguelike I enjoy, Vampire Survivors. When you're getting very late game and you've already upgraded every item you have, and all you're doing are statistical upgrades, you can just choose an option to just pick a random one always for the rest of your run. And I think that that is an option that could really benefit this, where you can at any point choose either just a random selection or just choose to pick a random selection or even skip or whatever. Just make it so that that screen no longer shows up for the duration of that red balloon encounter. And that makes it so that you actually like get to AFK rather than just have to tab back in every once in a while. And yeah, just feels like a waste of time. Another option as well I can think of is just adding the race. I don't know what it's actually called, but you know, just being able to send multiple rounds at once. I understand that kind of encroaches on the races and the endurance races, those mini games. But I still think that would help, because when your run is strong, then you actually get to clear these red balloon encounters faster as well. And it's interesting because, as I mentioned as well, like the mini games are the real fun, for me at least. I don't even know what I want. Can I? Sir, I wish I could cancel this screen, actually. I just wanted to look at what relics I had. But whatever. I guess we'll take that. And I think making red balloon encounters actually fun by doing that could be nice. You don't even necessarily have to add extra rewards if you do better or not, even though that would honestly make things interesting as well, because as it stands, there really are no rewards for doing good or bad on a red balloon encounter. You either fail or you don't, which I don't think necessarily has to be the case. But anyway, yeah, the pacing specifically around the red balloon encounters and just the amount of AFKing definitely takes away from the format, which I think is a really good idea overall. I think that Bloons is super well equipped to be a roguelike because there's just so many similarities overall. Because when I think of what makes roguelikes fun, I think of kind of the diversity of different strategies and builds that you can use on top of, you know, obviously different like random elements and whatnot that make each run unique and make each run fun. And Bloons has that. I mean, it's such a well-balanced game between all the different towers that you can play multiple different strategies very viably. And it can be really fun to figure out like which tower combinations can handle which different problems and things like that. So I think that Bloons as a game is actually really well suited to a roguelike genre. I just think that there are certain elements of roguelikes that it could take further inspiration from, because it has the map and it has the, you know, I guess campaign, just it has a run, but a lot of the pacing things are just way off to the point where, yeah, when your run is actually strong, it just feels slower rather than faster is honestly my biggest complaint. So there are so many, there's so many different ways that this can be improved to either make the actual red balloon encounters interesting, make shops interesting, make relics more interesting. But yeah, I think those are kind of the main 3 points. I know there's a lot of balanced things, like farms are really bad, for example. There's just different things that you can literally balance about the game and the relics and the towers to better suit Rogue Legends, but that wasn't really something I wanted to go into specifically. So anyway, that's probably all of the criticism I have about Rogue Legends. I think it's still fun, and I think it just has so much potential, really. But yeah, I figured I'd talk about that. I know this is definitely different compared to the TF2 stuff I always do, but hopefully it was still interesting nonetheless. And yeah, see you guys later.